Welcome this evening to the Planning Commission meeting. The date is Monday, July 27th. Will everyone please rise for Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. First item of tonight's agenda is the actual approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the agenda as printed.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Moving on to the approval of the minutes for the July 13th, 2015 meeting. Are there any changes? Did everyone have a chance to review it? Are there any changes that need to be made at all?
I have a couple of changes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I don't know what page it is because we're on the electronic version now, but I have written them out in interest of time. Do you want me to just hand them to you, or do you want me to read them verbally here? You can hand them to me. Okay, never mind.
Julie, that's no problem as far as you're concerned. Okay. Any other ones? Yeah. Did you have any?
No.
Okay. If no more change, I'll entertain a motion.
So move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. Moving on to public hearings for tonight. The first one is variance 2015-06 by Eden Prairie Development, LLC. The location of the project, 14301 Martin Drive. The request is to permit a freestanding sign 0 feet from the property line of a public right-of-way. City code requires a 10-foot setback in the multifamily residential zoning district. With that, will the proponent please come forward? Unless that's you. Okay. I wasn't sure who was. Thanks. Come forward, state your name, please spell your last name for city record, and tell us a little bit.
My name is Scott Carlston, developer of Martin Blue, apartment building in Eden Prairie. And we kindly asked the planning board, we're looking for a variance coming out of our site. Julie, do you have the exhibit on that we could put up? Thank you, Jim.
So everyone knows the projection is down too, so we'll be using the overhead camera.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I could just orient the site. This is Martin Drive. Here's Mitchell Road. The proposed sign location is this shaded area right at the corner.
If you could speak right into one of those microphones, that'd be great. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we're good.
I appreciate that, staff. In board, the Martin Blue sign actually is when you're coming out of the Buca restaurant, it's now a one-way, and you can't go up that direction. We tried to get a right in and a right out of there, but the traffic asked us not to do so. Therefore, this whole area up on the top proposal right down here is where we're trying to bring the sign to the front property edge. There's no interference there. It's a direct sight line coming in off Mitchell Road before you take your right down. And the sign that we are looking to put in would be something like this. And we just have a stone column with metal between that's going to say Martin Blue on the sign. It's been a unique challenge with signage on that site because we've got the gas station on the one side, we've got Buca on the other side, but since we are zoned as a residential site, we can only have a 6-foot square footage of signage. So it's been very difficult to try to figure that out and get it worked in. I think that we've accomplished that with staff. It's been very good to work with. So again, today's proposal is just simply being able to put the sign up towards the edge of the property line. There is extra space, like I said, that's not being used, so it's not going to be infringing on any other roads up there. I'll be happy to take any questions.
We'll go to city staff report, and then after that, if we have any questions, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Julie, you want to take us through the staff report, please?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as stated, the applicant is requesting a 0-foot setback for a freestanding sign in the multiple family residential zoning district. Due to the topography issues and the large drainage and utility easement and utilities located within the property, this is the location that seems to make the most sense for the property. As you are well aware, when Martin Blue or Mitchell Crossing as it was called at that time, went through the approval process, there were a variety of waivers that were granted for this development given the type of development that it is. And due to those constraints, it makes it somewhat challenging to provide a site for the signage. Staff is recommending approval of the variance because it does meet the 3-part test.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Staff, I have a question. I don't know who should take it. Under the conditions that are on the back of under Exhibit A, under the findings and conditions, it mentions the need to address successful drainage, as you put it, and vacation of utilities. Is that simply the responsibility of the city, or is it going to be, how does that take place?
Mr. Chair.
Make sure
Sorry.
it's done.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it is my staff's expectation that the applicant would make application for vacation of easements as depicted in the Exhibit B plans in the location that those posts or columns would be located, so that the easement would be vacated in order for those to be placed there.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Question for the applicant. Did I hear you say that you thought there was a restriction on the square footage of your sign to be 6 square feet?
Julie, you'd like to take that?
We're not asking for, there's no request for a area increase in the signage, is there?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I can address that question. The reference that was made to the 6 square feet is with regard to a wall sign. So if initially Martin Blue came in asking to do a wall sign, and by code they would only be allowed 6 square feet, which is why they've now pursued the option of a freestanding sign with a reduced setback to increase their visibility. So
Thank you.
they're not asking for an increase in the freestanding.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Travis.
My question, I think, is more of an overarching question. It kind of ties in with the TOD. So would I want to ask that here or with the TOD?
Why don't you wait till TOD?
Because it does relate to the go ahead. 0-foot setback. Well, I think maybe I'll just ask the question, then staff can formulate an answer between now and TOD. But this, I remember like 3 or 4 months ago, earlier in the year, we were discussing the work plan for the next upcoming year, and one of them was out-of-date ordinances or code that might be updated, and it seemed to remember a discussion that we were thinking that maybe our sign language, because we were getting some sign variance and sign waiver requests, was out of date, and we've got 2 new ones tonight. And this one particularly has a 0-foot setback, and with a lot of 0-foot setbacks in our sub-districts of the new TOD ordinance that we're going to be discussing about later tonight, I think it would be a good idea to revisit that sign language at some point in time, preferably sooner than later.
That's fine. Julie, at some point, can you schedule that and then just let us know?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I can speak to that now, it's not necessarily pertinent to this specific variance request, but staff will be doing a complete review of the sign ordinance in the very near future based on a Supreme Court case that came down in mid-June, which has prompted the need for staff to review its sign code in its entirety. So that will be forthcoming very shortly.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. One question I have for the applicant. If this passes tonight, does this meet your needs and your satisfaction with everything?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Any other final questions or concerns from the commission?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
If I may ask a general question about compliance within the drainage and utility easement that may be in place in a front yard like this, are there stipulations made when they apply for the sign permit that if work has to be done within the D&U easement, that removal and reconstruction of the sign is on the property owner's dime?
Well, we have to answer your question, yes, but it's a little more complicated than that because There are, as you see in your packet, there is some additional material on where the utilities are, and if they dig up the utilities, if there's an influence on the sign, and this whole corner is filled with public sanitary, private water, private gas, private drainage lines. And so the place for this is from our interest, from the public's interest, we made sure that our water main and sewer could be dug up without impacting this sign. But it would impact, and their sign location is kind of tied in very closely with gas lines and their drainage lines and their own water lines. So if they ever need to dig up or replace the sign, presumably they'd be dealing with their own utilities. And vice versa, if the public lines are having to have some work done, we're not going to be having to take down the sign, presumably, based on the drawings that they provided to us.
Okay. And so if you needed to work on those lines that you were trying to avoid, there wouldn't be any greater cost to the city for maintaining those lines with the sign in this proposed location than if the sign wasn't nearby?
Well, to be honest with you, there's probably a lot more cost in relocating all those other utilities than there is with the sign.
Okay.
Because the sign's far enough away, but the drainage lines and gas lines and some of those things would definitely be in the way, which we'd have to deal with in that case.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing this is a public hearing, is there anyone out in the audience that has any comments or concerns about this project? Okay, yes, sir, go ahead.
If I could, Council, there, the board, this, if I could show you, I think a little better explanation, it may help kind of clarify this. This area here is between the building and Mitchell Road. This drops off downhill into what's called a rain garden, which will then support the water before it infiltrates out into the wetlands. What Mr. Rue was talking about is a lot of our public utilities come up through here, and so that's why we'd actually designed a sign that will be spanned without a footing. So we're not going deep except for 2 round post piles here to avoid utilities. That was kind of the idea for this actual structure, the way it's set up. That was the whole idea, to avoid disrupting the underneath. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much, appreciate it. That being said, I don't see any other additional comments, so I'll entertain a motion.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, move forward with your project.
Thank you very much.
Second motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll entertain a second motion.
Move to recommend
I got ahead of
approval.
myself.
Move to recommend approval of the final order number 2015-06 based on Exhibit B plan stamp dated July 27th, 2015, and the information included in staff report dated July 24th, 2015.
Second?
We have a motion second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now you can move forward with your project. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Moving right along, variance 2015-07. Location of the project is 6409 City West Parkway. The requested to permit a tenant to have a wall sign in a location that is not on the exterior wall space the tenant occupies. City code requires wall signs on a multiple tenant building in the commercial zoning district to be placed on exterior wall signs where the tenant occupies. With that being said, will the proponent of the project please come forward?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the application was withdrawn late last week.
Thank you very much. I didn't catch that. Okay, we will move on to number C, variance 2015-08. Location is 7381 Moonlight Lane. Request is to permit a deck to be set back 10 feet from the rear property line. City code requires a 20-foot rear yard setback in the R1-9.5 zoning district. With that being said, will the proponent please come forward? State your name, spell your name for city record, and tell us a little bit about the project, please.
Hello. That works. My name is Patrick Steidel, and my last name is Steidl. And basically, we went to try to build a deck this summer, and we ran into some obvious problems. The house was built in '96. We moved in 2011, and we've kind of just had no deck this entire time. I don't think that a deck was ever put on, and all of the neighborhoods, or all the houses in the neighborhood, have decks, and it's kind of become a little bit of a safety issue recently because we have an almost 2-year-old who is learning to open doors and so on, and it's just kind of a 6-foot drop right now. We built deck plans, found out they wouldn't work, and we've been trying to fashion different options. But since the 20 feet comes so close to our house, it kind of leaves us with very few options. So we'd like to try to build the deck that we had been planning to do with, I guess, with your approval.
Okay. We'll go on to see staff report, and we'll let you know if we have any questions.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julie, will you take us through the staff report, please?
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the applicant is requesting a reduced rear yard setback in order to construct a deck on the rear of their property. As the applicant stated, the angle of the house on the property necessitates the variance in order to build a functional deck on the property. There is also very significant screening along the rear of their property, which would allow for a good buffer along the rear of the property. Staff is recommending approval of the variance because it does meet the 3-part test.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions or concerns?
I don't have a question, but I do have a kind of a frustration here. It seems like the homeowner was, whoever wanted to build the deck, I mean, they built a sliding glass door, and the builder basically set the homeowner up for a problem to begin with. That seems a little frustrating. I don't know that there's anything the city can do about it, but if I were in his shoes, I'd be kind of frustrated by having to go through the variance process when, you know, it was fundamentally designed that way. So I'm in favor of the variance. And I don't know if there's anything that we really can do as the city to hopefully keep this from happening again. If the house is reasonably designed to have a deck put out on it, and it's, okay, you understand.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my comment on that is the house was built, I believe, in the mid-1990s. I know in my time here at the city, we have made efforts as the building plans come in. We do look for locations of sliding glass doors to try and preempt situations like this.
Good, thank you.
Great comment. Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Can I follow up with that same comment? The photographs that were included in the packet indicate that the back of the house already has what looks like, are they called, ledgers at the rim joist area in anticipation of a deck being added. And I suspect that was done during the original construction, not something that you tried to start last summer, correct?
Yeah, they're very old.
So perhaps just food for thought when building permits are reviewed, and I don't know if design plans show those types of features on the house, if only the house is being constructed under the building permit, but there might be a future deck addition possibility that the contractor is designing towards, that could be a clue, and maybe some questions could be asked during the building permit review process, because it's obvious that someone thought that a deck would go right there.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing that this is a public hearing, is there anyone out in the audience that has any comments or concerns about this project? Not seeing any. With that, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, move to recommend approval of the final order number 2015-08 based on plans stamped dated June 25th, 2015, and information included in the staff report dated July 24th, 2015.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Move forward. Thank you very much. The next item for tonight's agenda, I think we're on D, correct? Juan Corporation, location of the project is 7575 Corporate Way. The request is a plan unit development district review with waivers on 2.88 acres and a zoning district amendment with the I-2 Industrial Park Zoning District on 2.88 acres. Will that proponent of the project please come forward? State your name, spell your last name for city staff, please, and tell us about your project.
Good evening. I'm Dave Perrill, P-E-R-R-I-L-L. I'm president of One Corporation. If If I can here, I'll work on getting the PowerPoint up.
You'll have to talk us through that PowerPoint just a little bit specifically to the viewers at home because they'll have that, but we won't be able to see it over there on the projector. So
Okay, will do. So, and what I'm here for is we're talking about relocating our corporate headquarters. We're currently at 7605 Corporate Way. We're looking to expand and move our facilities down to 7575 Corporate Way. And just give you a brief background on Warren Corporation. We've been around since 1982. A company was founded by my father a little over 30 years ago, and we develop, service, and maintain software and technology solutions for limited service restaurants. A lot of our customers you can see on the screen, Wendy's, Turkish Chicken, Cinnabon, McAllister's, Arby's, etc. We employ 104 people today and have over 3,500 stores across the United States and the world. We've been long-term constituents of Eden Prairie. We've been in our building since 2003, and we've owned and operated that. We were actually leases in 2 other facilities as well. So we've been long-term people here. We enjoy the community, and everything's actually worked out well for our ability to really get talent and attract people here to our facilities. We're looking to undergo some pretty aggressive growth here over the next several years, driving to over $20 million in revenue here by 2017. Over 126 employees is what we forecast. And the biggest thing that I guess drives our growth is really great people and talent. So we're committed to creating a top workplace, creating a great environment where we can attract that type of talent. And obviously one of the big things that drives into that is our facilities and our headquarters. So we're very attracted to 7575 Corporate Way. Some of the things that we really like about the facility is that it's on a golf course. It has a lot of natural settings and views that you don't find in a lot of office parks. It's very unique in that way. It has some great glass lines throughout the building. It gives our employees natural lighting and kind of a really cool, unique environment from which to work. Obviously, it stays in Eden Prairie. It's going to be very close to our current facilities where we'll maintain a warehouse. We can remodel it and do some substantial renovations to it. And it's in line with what I'd consider our 5-year growth plan. So it's kind of at that good size, not too big, not too small, where it can really size up as we grow. So our vision for what we want to make this facility into our world headquarters is a very open, dynamic, engaging environment. We employ a lot of software engineers, a lot of creative resources, a lot of people that really get engaged in that kind of open environment. Build in a lot of technology throughout the organization, throughout the facility. Build some amenities like a large open, what we call a rock star lounge, things with pinball and TVs and couches where employees can kind of relax, but also collaborate and have a good time and feel very comfortable at the office. We want to get a lot of open meeting rooms and those kind of things we're constrained at today at our current facilities. And then build what we call our digital kitchen, where we can showcase our technologies for our customers that visit us from all our locations across the world. So what we're requesting and what we're looking for here today is a PUD and a waiver for 100% office and to renovate the building from its current waiver of 77% office. There is warehouse space today, which we would consider of poor quality. It has low ceilings. We wouldn't consider the space planning necessarily very good for warehouse use. There's no truck dock, those kind of things. Our plans are to take out that warehouse space, convert it all to an office, and move forward with that. So we respectfully thank you for your time and are hopeful to get a positive outcome for our PUD.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll let you know if we have any other questions. Julie, you want to take us through the staff report, please?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, as stated, the applicant is requesting a PUD review. Specifically, they're asking for a waiver to increase their office use to 100%. The site currently has 85 parking stalls on it. Based on the parking requirement for office, it would require 119 stalls. However, the applicant's employee forecast and business model indicates that 85 parking stalls is sufficient to meet their needs, so staff is not recommending that they construct those additional proof of parking stalls that they have indicated on their plans. Staff is recommending approval of the PUD waiver, subject to it being issued to WAND as a building tenant. In the event that a subsequent tenant has similar parking needs demonstrated in a similar fashion, staff would recommend that that waiver be transferable to subsequent users. They also are asking for a PUD waiver to allow an increase over the impervious surface area in the shoreland zoning district. That is an existing condition. The applicant is not proposing any additional construction at this point. It is rather just memorializing the conditions that exist on the site. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioners. What kind of questions do you have?
I do have one question. When you said the waiver would be transferable, what would be the process? Would that come back through staff and the Planning Commission for that transfer if WAND were to move out of the facility?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the intent is that if the subsequent applicant could prove that they meet the parking that's on site at the time through their employee forecast, that it would be an administrative review through staff. If they had additional needs for parking beyond what was shown on the site, I would suspect that staff would direct them to go through a PUD waiver, and that would be a public process, again, similar to what we're going through today.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, can I get a clarification on the PUD district? The PUD district is already in place, and so we're just looking at a waiver from it. We're not getting a new PUD.
Correct, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. There was a PUD that was granted, I believe, in 1971 for the Edenvale development.
That's what I was wondering, the boundaries of that. So it's generally that industrial park north of Highway 5, south of the golf course, maybe bracketed by Mitchell on the east and maybe the trail on the west or something like that?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the Edenvale PUD is a very large PUD, so I can't speak to the specific parameters of that, but it is in that general area that Commissioner Farr has described.
Okay.
Thank you. So if there's an existing PUD, there's a lot of discussion about the parking on the street issue on this cul-de-sac. Is this a applicant problem or is this a PUD problem? There's a lot of businesses in the area that seem to have vehicles filling their parking lots, and I don't know. It wasn't exactly clear in here whether or not the parking on the street that was identified as a problem is the sole cause by this applicant or another one. There's that Amerifleet, I believe, across the street who has a lot of vehicles in the building they're proposing to build right now or purchase right now and throughout. So I guess the question is how wide is our purview to discuss the neighborhood traffic problem on the street at this time?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, with regard to the identified parking concerns along Corporate Way, that is not necessarily tied specifically to 7575 Corporate Way, which is the subject of the application this evening, nor is it specifically tied to 7605, the applicant's current location. It appears that there are a variety of businesses along Corporate Way, and a more comprehensive approach or research, rather, may need to be done in order to determine specific causes of those concerns.
And I'm assuming, Julie, that a mailing went out about this meeting tonight, so if really there wasn't a big problem, we'd probably see it out here anyways.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, yes, notices were sent out within 500 feet, and staff has not received any comments or concerns from other property owners along Corporate Way.
Okay.
So it's probably just my own curiosity then. Does the city have a different policy, a hard policy or soft policy regarding cul-de-sacs with regard to allowing parking on the street? Or do you ticket and tow? Or is there some allowance for that because of the lack of through traffic? And should we be at this time requesting more of a traffic research and report?
Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, the city has, for no parking signs, for example, those are generally placed on major collectors and arterial roadways as a as a standard practice, if you will. On these smaller streets, it's generally on a complaint basis. We've dealt with parking issues over on Fuller Road over the years, and this area we've never really. We know there's parking over there, but we've never really heard a lot of complaints about it. There were some parking issues that were going on from another business that couldn't park all their vehicles on their site, and they were actually parking over here, and that was kind of curtailed. But we really haven't heard a lot of problem. And if there is a problem, we would typically sign no parking signs out there and then enforce that.
Thank you.
Guess follow-up question for the applicant. So did your PowerPoint say you're going to fill up to 126 employees in your 5-year plan?
Yeah, in the 5-year plan, 126 employees.
And then so you have 85 spots, and I assume some will be visitors. Then are you assuming that that's going to, the bulk will spill out onto the street then? Is that kind of the idea? Or?
No, our 5-year growth plan has no parking within the street at all. So some of our employees will stay at the current facility, which will maintain our warehouse and our facilities. We also do have some remote employees. And also part of our call center has 3 shifts. So some people are there in the middle of the night, we have a second shift, and so on and so forth. So our projections show we're not going to go over the 85 parking limit at that facility.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yep.
Yes, go ahead.
And in fact, just to follow through with the math, the spreadsheet that was provided as part of the packet was just the employee parking forecast for this new building at 75, showing that, you're moving 95 people over there.
Right.
As you said, and there's other math associated with that. So the 165 people that you have in your TDM plan document minus the 95 moving leaves you with about 70 people back at the warehouse. So I don't know, just 165 minus 95, 70 people. I don't know if that pencils out for you, but I'm assuming that would be the reduction of parking at your current building.
Correct. Yep. So the bulk of the employees that will be moving will be our software administration, all of our other departments, actually, but our warehouse will be moving.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And do your parking issues have anything to do with the fact that you run 3 shifts and you get that odd overlap where people have to be remaining at their workstation at the time of job transfer, and therefore you have double parking for maybe
Not from
half
what
hour?
we see. The bulk of our employees are 8 to 5 or 7 to 4 for the most part. So some of the secondary shifts, like I said, we do have some employees that are traveling as well. So we have nationwide sales, we have nationwide field installation. That's also a piece of it. I think, and I apologize, I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, but the TDM plan, I think we don't have any consideration in that till the 3rd year. So prior to that, it's really just what we have in place today. So we're obviously hopeful that's going to make some impact on some things. Also, as Julie pointed out, we do have proof of parking to add some spots if need be, up to the full 119. Based on that, though, we don't think they're all necessarily going to be viable due to some of the wetlands and some of the other issues with the land. But we do think that there's going to be some available addition if, for some reason, our projections don't tie out.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do have one more clarification, and Julie, maybe I'm reading this wrong, or if you can help me clarify, but on the staff report, way at the end, number 5, bullet B, the last sentence there says, if WAN vacates the premises, the waiver shall lapse. And actually, that is what makes sense to me. I've seen what WAN has presented to us, and I'm comfortable that they have done their homework relative to parking, and my worry is more that we're instituting this for the next tenant potentially after them, and I guess I would rather give a staff and commission the opportunity to make sure that that tenant has done their homework as well as Juan seems to have done. You see my point?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, on page 5 of the staff report, under subdivision, or item 5, letter A, it does talk about that if WAN vacates the premises, the waiver is transferable to future users, provided that the future users can demonstrate that the site meets their parking needs with the amount of parking on site at the time of transfer. The future user should demonstrate their site meets parking needs by providing an employee parking forecast similar to the one provided by WAND. That is the staff recommendation.
Okay, I must be reading something else because that's not in what I have.
Yours, this is the last sentence in yours says, if WAN vacates the premises, the waiver shall be lapsed. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what mine says too.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I apologize for the change. That is, the language that I just read to you in the verbally is what was discussed with the applicant and what staff's recommendation was. I apologize that you got a version that was not reflective of our discussions with the applicant.
Okay, so to be clear then, what you read to us is what you
Correct.
are requesting and what staff is requesting for tonight.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that is correct.
Would you mind reading it one more time?
No, not at all. So item A says waiver to allow 100% office use in the I-2 zoning district. The business model that WAN Corporation has presented indicates they will be able to accommodate their parking needs with the 85 stalls provided on site. The approval to operate at 100% office use is granted to WAN Corporation as the building occupant. If WAN vacates the premises, the waiver is transferable to future users, provided that the future users can demonstrate that the site meets their parking needs with the amount of parking on site at the time of transfer. The future user should demonstrate the site meets their parking needs by providing an employee parking forecast similar to the employee parking forecast provided by WAN Corporation in the plan stamp dated July 7th, 2015.
Julie, what is the benefits with adding that last part versus with it, if we just say if WAN vacates the premises, the waiver shall lapse?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the applicant will be providing significant improvement in capital to the building. They have just gone through the review with deed through the state of Minnesota and have been granted a grant in order to make some improvements to the building and grow their business. The applicant has talked with staff about the potential of allowing the transfer if a similar type user comes in with similar type parking needs after making those capital improvements.
Okay. Fair enough, thank you. I mean, I think the end result's still the same. Okay. Moving along.
I would like to recircle back to Commissioner Farr's concern on the parking on the cul-de-sac. I too was going to bring that up because during the daytime I've noticed that it's full, like predominantly full with cars and spilling out onto other streets sometimes. Now I'm not sure if that is the applicant's company or if that's one of the other. I think there's 5 individual parcels which have multiple tenants in them. So I think there should be something done on that traffic management in that cul-de-sac or in that general area. I'm just not sure if the applicant needs to be burdened with that specifically or if there needs to be an overarching TDM process.
Well, and I think the charge for us tonight is just talking about the WAN Corporation, not necessarily the parking in the cul-de-sac. I think city staff can probably look into it more and let us know what your findings are. Fair enough? Okay. All right. Is there anyone out in the audience that has any comments or concerns with this project? So now would be the time. Okay. Not seeing any. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. And, Mr. Chair, move to recommend approval of the Planned Unit Development District review with waivers on 2.88 acres and zoning district amendment within the I-2 zoning district on 2.88 acres based on plans stamped dated July 7th, 2015, and the information included in staff report dated July 24th, 2015.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. You can move forward with your project. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The final item for our public hearings for tonight is City Code Amendment. Established a transit-oriented development or TOD zoning district. This is done by the City of Eden Prairie. The request is to amend the City Code Chapter 11, including establishment for a transit-oriented development zoning district and regulations for that zoning district. With that being said, Julie, I'm assuming you'll be taking us through it?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, as you're well aware, this is a public hearing that was continued from the July 13th meeting. At that meeting, you, as a Commission, had a discussion about the establishment of a TOD zoning ordinance. Staff has listened to the input that was provided from the Commission at that time, as well as input that was provided by stakeholders through the process and since the notification of the public hearing. Staff has made changes to the ordinance, and they are reflected both in a red line copy that was provided in the packet to you, as well as in a table format in the staff report. So some of the items were more housekeeping in nature and even were staff generated as we listened to your comments and those of the stakeholders through the review process. Some of them are a bit more notable, and so in my comments this evening I will run through some of the more notable patterns and leave some of the more minor details out of the discussion unless you want to raise them as specific questions for me. So one of the major changes that was made, or more notable changes rather, was the applicability section. There were references that were provided in that section of the ordinance referring to nonconforming state statute requirements, as well as noting that any TOD development is subject to the site plan review process as well as the PUD process. Based on comments provided by the Planning Commission, office uses are listed as a separate permitted use rather than being bundled in with the neighborhood commercial uses in the individual sub-districts. Additionally, step-backs are encouraged for buildings below 4 floors. And as you recall, in the original version, step-backs were required beyond 4 floors, but they are now also encouraged for buildings that are less than 4 floors in height. Language has also been included to address the location anticipated or required for structured parking and provides exceptions for surface parking within the subdistricts. Language was also revised to address ground floor visibility. As you recall, the ordinance talked about ground floor visibility for commercial uses, and it talked about, I believe the specific language was 100% clear. Staff has modified that in order to allow for some glazing or other mechanisms that may want to be put on some of those windows, while also allowing that visibility from the street for those ground floor commercial areas. The 60-foot entry spacing language was clarified to be specific to commercial uses only, as the Planning Commission discussed on the 13th. And the 10,000 square foot maximum was clarified to address neighborhood commercial in the TOD area. It's my understanding that there was a discussion that there was some concern about that being tied to office uses and industrial uses as well, so now it's clarified that it is specific to the neighborhood commercial. The bicycle parking requirements were decreased based on Commission feedback, as well as proof of parking that would be allowed for bicycle parking was increased from 25% up to 50%. Landscaping provisions have been modified to allow credit not only for trees, but also provide credit for planting beds, which include things like shrubs, perennials, grasses, annuals, things of that sort, as well as planting containers. So it allows for some more flexibility in those areas that are likely going to be a little more tight than we're used to seeing with typical development patterns. TDM plans have been encouraged for multifamily development in the language that is before you this evening. Staff has made those changes and has provided a copy of the redlined ordinance as well as the table format of the changes out to the stakeholders. We have received some comments and calls back on that. We also did receive specific comment from Liberty Trust companies. It is provided on the table for you this evening in goldenrod. Rick Weibland from Liberty indicated that he was not able to attend this evening, but he wanted his comments to be a part of the record. He also noted in his communication to me that they would continue to review the document and provide any additional comments that they may have prior to City Council review if this item moves forward to City Council review. So with that, I'd open myself up to any questions that you might have.
Well, it's clear that city staff has been very busy over the last 2 weeks, so thank you for your for your efforts. And I can tell you heard a lot of what was said. You even caught the stairs on page 11. I like that. That was good. First of all, I just have a question. Do you have any overall comments regarding the Liberty Property Trust write-up that they did for us?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I took a quick look at the comments that they have provided. I believe a handful of those can be addressed through probably some direct communication and further explanation of what staff's intentions are with the language. And staff will certainly reach out to Mr. Weiblen and have those discussions. And as I said, I anticipate that they may even have some additional comments, as we engage in those conversations.
Right. I appreciate that open communication with the tenants. Thank you very much. With that being said, commissioners, without having a shot to try to rewrite the whole thing, does anyone have any questions or concerns with what city staff came up with?
So just to clarify for city staff, none of the goldenrod suggestions have been incorporated as of yet, correct? You just got them today.
They were submitted today, correct?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, yes, I received them late this afternoon. So what is in goldenrod is provided for your information based on the comments that I suspect Mr. Weiblen would provide if he were here in person.
Right. Okay. Are there any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I too want to thank staff for listening so hard on a difficult evening a couple of weeks ago when we didn't have power and take as many fastidious notes on all of our comments, so thank you. One of the topics we brought up early was the a lack of direction on loading dock facilities in the TOD district, and I noted that at the very end, under what is maybe now a subdivision 8 or 9, that it just adds a pointer back to the Chapter 11, which is appropriate. There was a brief conversation on whether or not we would allow backing from a street possibly into a loading berth, which I suspect is not allowed right now in Chapter 11. But because of the density of this development, was there any consideration or discussion by staff internally about changing or modifying any truck turning behaviors off the public way or on the public way, or potentially street deliveries because of this ordinance?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you to Commissioner Farr for reminding me about those last provisions. I intended to comment on those in my initial remarks. The end of the ordinance includes, I believe it's 5 specific subdivisions that are referenced in the TOD, would reference back to other provisions in the code, specifically loading facilities, architectural standards, signage, lighting, and tree replacement. And as necessary, staff will be coming forward with revisions to those sections of the code where there might be inconsistencies between those provisions now and the TOD, so that there is some clarity on the direction of how the TOD is to be implemented with regard to those performance standards.
Okay.
Okay. If I can follow up with another question, with the 0-foot setback on at least 2 or 3 of the subsections of TOD, again, what's going to happen with the D&U easements around the perimeter? Are those easements going to be moved into the right-of-way? Or is there a concern about not allowing adequate space for public utilities?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, in the draft you saw on July 13th, in the mixed use and residential subdistricts, I believe it was, there was a 10-foot front yard setback as a minimum, and then a maximum at another designation. Staff has revised that to be a 0-foot setback, and so it is not required that they have 0 feet. They certainly could construct at a 5 or a 10 or an 8-foot setback, but staff has provided the flexibility in the draft ordinance to allow for a 0-foot in the event that it works best for their site. In the event that they would utilize that 0-foot setback, it is expected that they would work with staff through the development process to identify the proper placement for those facilities, whether it be in a drainage and utility easement or within the right-of-way.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, yes, go ahead, Travis.
If you could just clarify if there was any changes to the usable open space percentage classification. As I was reading through it, it doesn't look like there were, other than just some definitions or the way that they were languaged.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the usable open space, as Commissioner Woodkey pointed out, provides some additional clarifications and formatting changes, but there were not any specific changes proposed to the allocations, if you will.
Do you have any additional comments? Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead while I'm finding my
Okay.
additional comment.
You mentioned the term definitions and it struck a chord. Apparently, I'm finding a couple new terms, primary transit street and secondary transit street in the language. Those weren't added as definitions at the front of this document. There was reference to them being shown on the comprehensive guide plan, so perhaps they're defined in another location in the code. Could you clarify that?
Sure, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. The terminology primary and secondary transit streets is a new term that was not provided in the July 13th version. That is a term that, as staff has looked at a variety of design issues, whether it's building frontages or how parking structures are oriented or architectural elements, staff felt it was important to identify what those primary and secondary avenues or corridors would be. So it is staff's intention that as the comprehensive plan language moves forward for you, presumably in the next couple of months, that the comprehensive plan language would address not only the definitions and purposes and functions of those roadways, but also identify what those roadways would be, or at least provide criteria for which those streets would be measured against in the future.
Okay, very good. Travis, did you find your?
As a
yes,
follow-up,
go ahead.
could I just simply ask, given that situation, I understanding correctly that you don't necessarily think it needs to be put in the TOD as a definition as well, just so that, or a reference to, I know you're already referencing the guide plan, and you're going to be anticipating changes being made, as you just said. But I was just curious whether, just for convenience of the users of this new ordinance, if it would be helpful to have some reference in the definitions, at least once the guide plan is amended for the future or something.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that's a very good comment. Once those definitions are tweaked through the public process and vetted through the internal review process, I think that would be a great addition to the TOD ordinance to provide that clarity in the TOD section as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Travis, go ahead.
I found my follow-up. I think last meeting I addressed the question of public versus privately owned, public or open space. Privately owned open space and publicly owned open space, and the accessibility or the allowability of the public to be within private sector or the privately owned areas. And so I was just flipping through here quickly, and the employment subdistrict was, the usability open space is at 5%, the mixed use is at 7%, and then the residential is at 10%, I think is the way my packet reads. I'm just kind of curious with staff and if there were proponents in the private sector that addressed or asked this question on the viability of maintaining those specific sub-district requirements on public accessible open space for usable open space requirements versus wanting to have their privately owned and maintained open space. I mean, with zero setbacks, we're maximizing the availability of the building footprint itself, and we've got right-of-way, we've got transit, we've got everything that's going on with that. I mean, what were the concerns of the private sector side of that?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'm going to try and restate that just because I want to make sure I'm understanding and providing the answer that Commissioner Woodkey's looking for. The TOD the TOD ordinance has the 3 different subdistricts, which identifies specific requirements with regard to usable open space requirements. As you said, the densities are higher, the setbacks are reduced from what we see in some of our more, I'm going to call them traditional zoning districts, but there is a provision for that usable open space. If I'm understanding your question correctly, it is, if that is usable open space, is that open to the general public, or could say it's an office user, could they restrict that area and only have it as open space available to their employees rather than the general public? Is that correct?
That's kind of part A of my, yeah.
Okay, let's just tackle part A first. In the stakeholder outreach that staff engaged in with the stakeholders through the TOD areas, there was not specific nor substantial concern raised on that particular issue because there is a green space open space requirement, as if you will, in the TOD. It inherently kind of takes care of itself. With regard to how that open space is policed or regulated, if you will, that is something that staff would look to handle through the PUD process, and depending on what the function of that open space is and how it fits in within that TOD specific subdistrict, that neighborhood, we would take a look at that on a case-by-case basis and work with the applicant.
Okay, you just answered part C of the.
Okay.
Good. So part B is, I guess, kind of reiterating. I think you might have said something about it with the percentages themselves. What is the hinge pin upon which you have made that basis for the specific percentages? Because they're different for each district. So what was the qualification process for coming up with that 5, 7, and 10%?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, as we worked through the initial creation of a working draft with HKGI, the consultant that the city had on contract, there was research of other best management practices, what other communities have done, what's worked for those areas, and trying to merge that together with you, if you will, with the characteristics and spirit and intent of the community of Eden Prairie to arrive at those specific numbers.
So there must be a difference between the sub-districts on layout and stuff like that, which we can obviously see with everything, with all the other requirements. So that's where you came with the numbers. Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
While by no means have I absorbed everything in this goldenrod handout that we just received this evening, one of them just caught my eye near the bottom of page 1 about minimum building height in the TODE district. And I recall that being a conversation of ours 2 weeks ago, how in the draft ordinance we have permitted uses for light industrial, specifically manufacturing, R&D, wholesale, packaging, showroom assembly, flex space, etc. And yet it looks like we have a 2-story building height minimum in that district, which seems a little bit at odds with those uses typical for our city and others. Any particular reason why that stayed at 2 stories instead of allowing single story?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the TODE, while it allows for industrial type of uses, it also allows for neighborhood commercial uses, and it allows for office uses, those uses which are more inclined to be more than a single story. In the event that a user was coming in that was an industrial use and wanted to construct a single story building because it met their needs, staff expects that they would ask for a PUD waiver through that PUD process that TOD developments will be going through. But the minimum remained at 2 in order to address the variety of other uses that are allowed within that TOD area.
Okay. Thank you.
To your point, Commissioner Farr, would it be more advisable, or would you maybe recommend saying a minimum height specific, like as in a foot requirement, as opposed to a story requirement? Because you're thinking that industrial will not necessarily go tall, but
yeah, I wasn't all that concerned about the height of the structure. I think I don't think anybody has a trouble with height in these districts. I don't want to speak for everybody, but height wasn't my issue as much as the nature of the building construction. The manufacturing and heavy-duty warehouse distribution uses need heavy-duty floors, and second-floor occupants with those uses just it's not a feasible building construction type. Those are usually buildings on grade with taller clear heights. You're right. So I was more concerned that we're wiping out uses that may be in these districts now or would want to be in these districts for employment purposes, and it looks like they're being permitted, but frankly, they're not welcome.
Well, I would say, too, that this document is a living document. And with that being said, I think that tenants will have the flexibility to be able to come to the city and to be able to request certain waivers, and the city at that point in time will go through the waiver process as normal. So I think this is just really just a framework of a written document to kind of get us started, and that there will be changes throughout the years as we continue to move through this process.
And let me add a comment, because I agree with Commissioner Farr's comment. I think to some degree, it's exactly what we are saying in this document, is that they could do that, but frankly, I keep thinking that this transit-oriented zone is a 10-minute walkscape from the station. And from my standpoint, I can argue that putting an industrial application in that area probably isn't what we want, or isn't what would be ideal. I don't think, I think the way it's written is we aren't absolutely drawing a hard line in the ground and saying no way, never, but I think we are discouraging it. And frankly, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I understand your point, and outside of the transit-oriented development, excellent point, but I think actually inside the district, I think we are trying to discourage it a little bit. And frankly, that makes sense to me.
That's kind of where I was going with my questioning.
Okay.
Whether or not staff felt that same way, and that's why we were not changing the ordinance, or exactly the way you phrased it, we were purposely trying to avoid having single-story buildings within these TOD zones.
And I think as long as there's a mechanism to discuss that in the future, I think the signal we're sending, in my mind, is appropriate without saying not only no, but heck no.
Yeah, putting a hard line on it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we've had some great conversation over the last 2 meetings with this. I'm ready to move forward. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, move to recommend approval of the amendment to City Code.
Can I hold on one second? Is there anyone out in the audience that has any comments or concerns? I should ask that question. Sir, do you have a comment that you'd like to?
I'll just make a quick comment.
Okay, Julie, we have officially closed the public hearing. Can we officially open the public hearing for a comment real quick?
You certainly can if you wish to.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just rescind my prior motion.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for catching. I wanted to make sure that. Yes, sir. Please.
Tom Goodrum with Westwood Professional Services. I'm here on behalf of Liberty Properties, and I appreciate all the work that's been done with this ordinance. I just wanted our input tonight is just to not talk. We understand the purpose of the TOD ordinance and the direction and the future, the vision that the staff and the Planning Commission is approving tonight. Our concern and when we work with staff in the future, other property owners, there's such a huge gap between what the TOD want to see and what exists out there today. It's those areas that's in between, because a property owner cannot do revisions or additions or minor additions to their property without meeting the current codes, and there's not a property out there that can meet these codes. This ordinance is set up for a complete redevelopment of sites. As you talked earlier about this 2-story in the TODE district. A single-story building could not expand without coming in asking for multiple waivers per this code requirement. And so we're just asking, and that's what Julie brought up today, that we will continue to work with staff, but those are the concerns and items that Liberty has and other property owners have as this moves forward, because right now we don't know when these stations be built, especially the town center or the Mitchell station. I mean, they're deferred. So there may be a large gap where current property owners are restricted by this ordinance, which has a great vision but doesn't meet current what's existing on site today. So
Great.
Those are the concerns, and again, we'll continue to work with staff.
And I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. And if I know city staff like I think I know them, they will be more than happy to work with you. And
they've always have been.
Very good. We appreciate those comments, and we're glad you're here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that being said.
Before we move on to a motion, with what he just mentioned, I see that under the applicability, we striked out the effectivity of this new ordinance going into effect right away, even for all structures or all parcels for within the sub-districts underarching the whole TOD. So when is the effectivity of this?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the TOD ordinance if this language were to move forward through the Planning Commission, through the City Council, and is approved, just establishes the regulations for the TOD ordinance itself. So it would allow property owners to take a look at code and have an idea of what are the requirements that staff would be looking for in the instance of redevelopments or expansions. It would actually not apply on the ground until we have gone as a city through the comprehensive plan process and identified those areas, and then also the rezoning process to establish the zoning on the ground for those properties. That is the point at which these regulations would be in force and effect for specific properties.
And I would assume that with the comprehensive guide plan update and going forth with that, it would be in line with what Met Council and the various sites are, because we've already eliminated one, and there's talk about another. And
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, as we look to amend the comprehensive plan to address TOD, not only would we address it through language provisions, but also through mapping provisions as well.
Thank you.
Okay, that being said, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
A motion second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Mr. Chair, move to recommend approval of the amendment to City Code, Chapter 11, including establishment of a transit-oriented development zoning district and regulations for that zoning district based on information included in staff report dated July 24th of 2015.
Second.
A motion second, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Good work, Commissioners. And thank you, City staff, too.
Good staff, yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Do we have any planners reports tonight, Julie?
No.
Okay. Members reports, specific with light rail.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Continuing business? Any new business? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.